Welcome to What to Pair, your no-frills guide for pairing food and wine. What do I mean by that? Well, I take a food, I pair it with 5 wines, I give a quick little rating, and then on the next slides, I just explain why these rankings work. Today, we are covering prime rib roast and wine pairing. And here you can see my top 5 favorite wines that I would recommend. So first up, we have Bordeaux and prime rib pairing. I give this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. While I highly recommend Bordeaux, there are several caveats you have to kind of be aware of with this red wine. The first is that this is a highly collectible wine with many different tiers. So the bottles that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, well, these are bottles that use the finest grapes during the best growing conditions, during the best year possible. And this isn't a wine you'd want to exactly drink with prime rib if you are new to red wine or Bordeaux. I would suggest starting off with a medium or beginner tier with Bordeaux. A beginner tier would use, the common grapes that just grew in the vineyards, the fields. They're not the best grapes, but they're not bad either. What makes Bordeaux collectible too is that it is meant to be aged. And it's meant to be aged because this wine is bursting with tannin. And tannin is that element of red wine where your cheeks get sucked in due to the dryness of the wine. Bordeaux, when you age it for a few decades, a couple decades, those tannins soften and it just makes the wine a lot more drinkable, a lot more enjoyable. But you can also enjoy that wine today if you have it with prime rib. Prime rib is full of protein and fat, and those elements, they soften the tannin, making the wine not necessarily age, but evolve in your mouth. So those dark fruity flavors of Bordeaux, they shine. Those black cherry, those cassis, those blackberry, those flavors, they come out along with the complex flavors of Bordeaux, such as pencil lead, vanilla, truffle. They all come to the surface when you have this wine when it's young with prime rib. For an aged Bordeaux, I would probably stick to a leaner cut of beef that isn't as high in fat. Again, because those aged bottles of Bordeaux, they're not going to need that softening, and the juicy flavors of prime rib, they just might overshadow a Bordeaux in this instance. So if you're buying a Bordeaux, I would highly recommend you ask an employee wherever you buy your wine which one they would recommend. For example, if you want to enjoy prime rib at home or you're bringing a bottle to a party. With Bordeaux at a restaurant, I wouldn't go for the most expensive bottle on the wine list. That bottle might have been aged for a couple decades. Check out the vintage, of course. I would ask the wine sommelier or whoever is in charge of the wine list what they would recommend. Most restaurants, they're going to have a couple tiers of Bordeaux, or they might even offer it by the glass if they have a budget-friendly Bordeaux that is available. Our next pairing here is Cabernet Sauvignon and prime rib, and I give this 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I would recommend a young Cabernet Sauvignon in this case because, of course, it is full of tannin. This is a full-bodied red wine full of cassis, cherry, and blackberry flavors, much like Bordeaux. So you're going to need a young Cabernet Sauvignon where the tannin is again going to be softened by the protein and fat element of prime rib. That way, again, the fruit flavors of the Cabernet Sauvignon come out along with the more complex flavors that you would never notice before if you drank this wine young, because your cheeks would just be puckered inwards and it's just not a pleasant experience on its own while young, and you need the food to make this wine palatable when it is young. Our third pairing is Shiraz and prime rib. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. Shiraz is very jammy and peppery, and the pepper notes, well, they just add additional flavor to prime rib. A lot of us enjoy pepper on our red meat. And the jammy notes, well, they are refreshing against the full flavor of prime rib. Australian Shiraz is probably the most popular Shiraz going right now. It's been popular for almost a couple decades. Australian Shiraz is a little larger than life, and that is a little sweet. It's kind of tailored towards American audiences in some respect. It's very bold and rich. And while this goes with prime rib, I find it is better maybe for grilled meats, where grilled meats have more of an intense flavor. So I'd probably put this with a ribeye steak that's been grilled versus a slab of roasted prime rib. I myself would search more for a Syrah, which is the same grape as Shiraz, but Syrah is more of an old world Shiraz. It's a little more restrained, less jammy, but you still get those fruit flavors, those dark fruit flavors in the wine, and it's still a little bit peppery. That is my personal preference. If you love Australian Shiraz, by all means, pair it with your prime rib. Since Shiraz is popular, I would understand why you'd want to have that with your prime rib, especially if you're going to a dinner party. You might not feel comfortable bringing a European bottle of Syrah, since Syrah, it might be from France and it might be intimidating to people, even to yourself, in that you just don't understand it. Where Australian Shiraz, we all kind of get it. A lot of the bottles have like a cute animal on it. Lots of people love Australian Shiraz. And if you're going to a Christmas party, like I said, or a banquet or something where you're bringing a bottle of red wine and they're serving prime rib, Australian Shiraz will hit the right notes. But I would recommend, if you're having prime rib at home or at a restaurant, ask for a Syrah, see if they got one. Maybe for some extra fun, pick up some Shiraz from Australia as well, and compare the two and see what your preference is and see if you agree or disagree with me. Our fourth pairing is Barolo and prime rib pairing, and Barolo is an Italian red wine made from the Nebbiolo grape, and it is incredibly tannic. This wine has a phrase associated with it where it is equivalent to being kicked in the face by a ballerina, and that is to say this looks like a lighter red wine. It's a thin-skinned grape, so it doesn't have a deep, dark color. It's very elegant looking. It smells elegant, very perfumey, but when you take a sip, it's just like getting kicked in the face by a ballerina. And this is a red wine that is meant to be aged for decades. However, as we learned above, when you combine something tannic with something high in fat and protein like prime rib, those tannins are softened up and the wine is instantly enjoyable. And you can taste the fruity flavors of Barolo. More of the perfume comes out, more of the flowery violet flavors, along with the leather and tar and cigar box flavors of Barolo that many people love. Barolo is a little more expensive. You can buy a young Barolo. It won't be overly expensive, but for those aged versions, you're going to pay a lot of money. So buying young and enjoying this wine with prime rib is a great opportunity. My final pairing is Zinfandel and prime rib. I give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. This isn't my first choice to pair with prime rib, but many people love it, so I thought I would recommend it. People go nuts over this in some instances. There are different varieties of Zinfandel that you can purchase. The more popular ones tend to be sweet and high in alcohol. I would go more for an old vine Zinfandel pairing where you're not going to get those sweet flavors. Chances are, though, if you're new to wine, you're probably going to end up with a sweeter version of Zinfandel because that's going to be what is flooding the shelves. And when you're new to wine, you're sort of intimidated by making purchases and whatnot. You haven't really experimented. So with a sweet version of Zinfandel, I would pair that up with prime rib with horseradish. Horseradish has got some heat to it, and the sweetness of Zinfandel puts out the heat. And then this allows you, once the heat's out, to taste the more herbally flavors of the horseradish along with the meaty flavors of the prime rib, plus the jammy fruit bomb flavors of the Zinfandel are allowed to shine as well. Zinfandel does have some tannin in it, a moderate amount, but this is generally a wine I would drink more with barbecued meats, and that's because Zinfandel is acidic more than it is tannic. So Zinfandel goes with those barbecue sauces. However, many people just love Zinfandel with prime rib. I am not one of those. Again, I like it more with grilled meats, but by all means, if you're a Zin lover, go ahead, pair it with prime rib. For more pairings, and I got dozens more on my website, the link will be below. Just go to my website and just type in prime rib, and you will see more of my ratings for various bottles of red wine. So that wraps up another pairing. I put out a pairing video every week. So until next week, cheers.